Welcome, and thank you for finding your way here. This is a quiet space, one made for soft voices and overlooked stories. So much of history has been told by men, about men, but here I offer something different. Stories of women, narrated by a woman, told slowly, gently, to help you drift to sleep. Research shows many people fall asleep more easily to a soothing female voice, perhaps because it echoes early comfort. If you'd like to join on these quiet journeys, I'd love to have you subscribe. And please share with me any topics you'd most like me to explore. Whether you sleep through every word or stay with me until the end, let's start to get relaxed. Turn on your fan, put on your eye mask, settle into your favorite weighted blanket, and close your eyes. Let's begin by taking 2 long deep breaths, and then sigh them out. We will start to switch your brain into a more relaxed state. Clear your mind, and just listen to my words. Please enjoy this telling. Now, let us begin to discuss the dangers of beauty and the price we have paid for it. Let's begin not with a warning, but with a question. How far have women gone, and how far have they been pushed in the name of beauty? Not so long ago, a pale face was the gold standard of elegance. Never mind that it took lead dust or a pinch of arsenic to get it. Wide, glassy eyes were praised as poetic, even if it meant dropping poison into them. And a tightly cinched waist? A visible sign of self-control, virtue, and breeding, even if it cost a few ribs. This isn't about scandal or shock value. It's about curiosity, about looking at the past not with mockery or horror, but with the respect due to those who lived it. For women throughout history, beauty was never just vanity. It was survival, status, morality, and sometimes even rebellion. Whether these practices were chosen with agency or endured under pressure, they reveal something quiet and compelling. The body has long been a battleground and a canvas for navigating power. The story of dangerous beauty isn't just tucked into powdered wigs or stitched into corset seams. It's in the silent sacrifice of risked health for social acceptance. In the whispered knowledge passed down about which remedies worked and which might kill you just a little slower. Let's begin with the shade that whispered elegance, purity, and peril. In Renaissance and Victorian Europe, the paler your skin, the higher your status. This wasn't just about avoiding the sun, it was about embodying a kind of fragile, porcelain perfection. Pale skin meant you weren't toiling outdoors. It suggested refinement, delicacy, and virtue, sometimes to the point of looking a little ghostly. To achieve this aesthetic, women and men turned to lead-based powders, specifically Venetian ceruse, a deadly concoction made from white lead and vinegar. Applied liberally to the face, neck, and chest, it created an alabaster sheen that masked blemishes and signaled wealth. But over time, it also corroded the skin, caused tooth decay, led to hair loss, and in some cases, caused death by lead poisoning. The irony? The more damage it caused, the more the wearer needed to reapply. It was a vicious cycle, one powdered cheek at a time. If lead wasn't enough, arsenic entered the beauty scene with quiet menace. In the 19th century, women took arsenic wafers and even drank diluted arsenic water to clear the complexion. The result? A slightly translucent waxen look that was seen as desirable. Arsenic also subtly altered capillaries and pigmentation, lending an eerie smoothness to the skin. It thinned the body and dulled the eyes again, mimicking illness as beauty. Of course, the medical establishment raised concerns, but society largely turned a blind eye. Pale, delicate women were fashionable, not dying. Or rather, they were both, and no one wanted to say it aloud. The toxic face was a status symbol, and if a woman grew ill, it was quietly assumed she was simply unfortunate, not poison. The pursuit of perfection didn't end with powders and potions. Some women went as far as ingesting chalk, vinegar, or ammonia in desperate attempts to slim the waist and preserve the pallor. Fashion magazines printed recipes for homemade skin bleaches that included everything from mercury to lye. If it burned, it must be working. But it's important to remember, this wasn't always vanity. For many, beauty was survival. An unmarried woman had fewer options. Her appearance could open doors, determine marriage prospects, or provide limited power in social negotiations. In some circles, beauty was currency, and the price for it was high. A modern comparison? While lead dust and arsenic wafers may be relics of the past, the desire to lighten or perfect the skin still hums beneath many beauty rituals today. And it's not limited to any one group. Fair skin has long been coded as desirable across cultures, including among white women, where tanning trends come and go, but paleness is often still linked to youth and flawlessness. The deeper message that lighter, smoother skin signals worth is a quiet undercurrent many have been taught to accept, regardless of background. In places like China, South Korea, India, and parts of Africa, skin whitening products remain enormously popular. The language has evolved, no longer bleaching, but brightening, glow-enhancing, or tone-correcting. Yet many of these creams and serums still carry harmful ingredients like hydroquinone, corticosteroids, or even mercury. In South Korea, the cultural aesthetic of baekhyul prizes porcelain skin alongside youth and delicacy. In India, fairness has been linked with beauty, success, and upward mobility ideals reinforced by decades of advertising. And in Western markets, the dominance of airbrushed, light-skinned models has shaped a standard that's subtly persistent even as representation improves. White women, too, are often chasing a kind of unblemished radiance, buying into retinol routines, chemical peels, or laser treatments aimed at achieving the same impossible ideal. The packaging may be cleaner, the claims more scientific, but the message hasn't changed much. You'll be more loved, more accepted, if you lighten, tighten, or smooth. These messages don't shout, they whisper, and that whisper echoes across centuries. From pale powders to prescription creams, from arsenic-laced wafers to brightly lit store shelves, the methods have changed, but the pressure hasn't disappeared. We've simply renamed it, bottled it, and handed it over with a loyalty card. And now, from skin to sight, we turn our attention to the eyes, romanticized, emphasized, and, at times, poisoned in the pursuit of beauty. Of all the things to tamper with in the name of beauty, the eyes may be the most delicate and the most dramatic. There's something timeless in the desire to have our eyes speak before we do, to suggest mystery, softness, invitation. A glance can be disarming, persuasive, or protective. And so, it's no surprise that history is lined with stories of women going to quiet, sometimes painful extremes to make their shimmer just right. In Renaissance Italy, women turned to atropa belladonna, literally, beautiful lady, a deadly nightshade whose juice, when dropped into the eyes, dilated the pupils into dark, glossy pools. The effect was haunting. Wide, glassy eyes that caught candlelight and reflected it back with a kind of trembling allure. It suggested innocence and passion in equal measure. It also suggested risk. Belladonna is a potent neurotoxin, and with regular use came blurred vision, light sensitivity, and eventually blindness. Yet in a culture where a woman's best chance at upward mobility was to look like a romantic painting come to life, the danger was tolerated. Beauty, after all, had its own brutal economics. The aesthetic of delicate illness outlasted belladonna by centuries. In Victorian England, physical fragility became the height of fashion. Pale skin, hollow cheeks, and watery, reddened eyes, often signs of tuberculosis, were paradoxically seen as enviable. Known as the romantic disease, TB was thought to signify depth, refinement, even artistic temperament. Women didn't necessarily want the sickness, but they mimicked its look, dabbing lemon juice beneath their eyes, skipping meals, applying powders to drain the face of color. It was as if the more unwell you appeared, the more pure, delicate, and morally upright you were believed to be. And of course, there were the homegrown cosmetics, brewed up in kitchens and scrawled in passed-down notebooks. A touch of soot mixed with animal fat became early mascara. Burnt clove and lampblack formed eyeliner. Kohl, a staple from Egypt to India, was sometimes laced with lead or other hazardous ingredients. Eye-brightening drops promised sparkle but carried vague and unregulated risks. Women may not have known all the chemistry, but they understood the stakes. These weren't mindless rituals. They were calculated acts of survival in a system that equated desirability with destiny. Even the act of eye enhancement held symbolic weight. To decorate the eye is to alter how one is seen and how one sees. It blurs the line between perception and presentation. What might look like vanity from the outside was, from within, often a quiet form of resilience, a signal to the world. I understand the rules, and I'm playing to win. Today, we may not be dabbing belladonna into our eyes by candlelight, but the desire to soften the gaze, widen the pupils, and create that elusive look of emotional openness hasn't gone anywhere. We've just traded the tincture for the tube. Lash serums, some of the most popular eye-enhancing products today, often rely on prostaglandin analogs, compounds originally developed to treat glaucoma. Repackaged in sleek bottles with gold trim, they promise longer, darker lashes in a matter of weeks. But the side effects remain quietly listed: eye redness, irritation, blurred vision, permanent iris discoloration. In rare cases, even fat loss around the eyes that subtly hollows the face. It's not belladonna, but it belongs to the same family of bargain, beauty at a biochemical cost. In East and Southeast Asia, the wide-eyed aesthetic lives on through circle lenses, cosmetic contacts designed to enlarge the iris and create a doll-like youthful gaze. Mass-produced, digitized, and worn by influencers and teens alike, they echo belladonna's original promise, to be seen as delicate, innocent, and softly irresistible. But improperly used, they've caused corneal abrasions, infections, and long-term damage. Still, demand remains high. Looking fragile, paradoxically, has become a powerful kind of armor. Western beauty routines aren't exempt from the trend. From bleached brows and fox eye eyeliner to dramatic lash extensions, the goal is often the same: to refine and reframe the gaze. But the method/glue near the tear line, tweezers near the lid, pigments near the retina are far from benign. Each carries its own set of risks, accepted in exchange for the look. Natural beauty becomes a performance that requires maintenance, investment, and sometimes quiet discomfort. And now there's the digital veil. Filters widen eyes without a touch. Apps lift the outer corners and smooth the skin beneath. What belladonna once did drop by drop, software now does instantly. These filters don't just enhance, they subtly rewrite the baseline. The average face, the one we measure ourselves against, has already been tampered with. None of this is to scold or shame. It's simply to pause and notice the continuity. The poisons may have changed names, but the message still whispers beneath the mirror. Be soft, be open, be beautiful, but don't ask what it costs. The eye isn't just for seeing, it's for being seen. And the lengths will go to be seen as beautiful. They haven't changed all that much. Only the tools. They say the eyes are the window to the soul. But what about the rouge on the cheeks, the crimson curve of a lip, or the sharp arc of a brow? These weren't just flourishes. They were signals of youth, fertility, and desirability of health, or at least the illusion of it. And women, practical and persistent, have always found ways to paint vitality into place, even when the palette came laced with poison. In ancient Egypt and Rome, and later among the powdered elites of the Renaissance and Baroque courts, women reached for color, red ochre, yes, but also vermilion, a pigment made from mercury sulfide. Its shimmer was seductive, its cost came later. Mercury, absorbed slowly through the skin, brought tremors, tooth loss, even madness, but a pale face with flushed cheeks was the fashion. A mercury flush whispered of life, of warmth, of breeding, so it was worn. Carmine, extracted from the crushed bodies of cochineal insects, offered a slightly less lethal alternative, though it wasn't without its own complexities. Smeared onto lips or cheeks, it delivered a vivid, lasting stain. But to achieve just a single ounce, tens of thousands of tiny beetles had to be harvested, boiled, and dried. Still, women did it, or bought it, or wore it, because that pop of red made the difference between looking tired and looking touched by youth. Eyebrows were no safer. Depending on the century, they were burned, bleached, painted over, or plucked into non-existence. In Elizabethan England, women covered their brows in lead-based white paste to achieve the prized high forehead. Others filled them in with soot, charcoal, or burnt clove. Lead and ash may not seem like beauty tools, but they were used with care and with calculation. A well-shaped brow framed a face, tilted the gaze, conveyed a kind of cleverness, a sort of control. Of course, control always came at a cost. Mercury exposure, lead poisoning, chronic skin irritations, eye infections, all common side effects of the everyday beauty arsenal. There were no ingredient lists, no patch tests, only the whispered advice of older women and the visible effects worn quietly on the skin. Today's lip stains, brow pencils, and blushes come in sleek packaging and claim dermatologist approval, but their lineage is rooted in this same pursuit, the quiet, persistent shaping of the self. Only now, the danger comes with a marketing budget and a safety disclaimer in fine print. Modern beauty might be better packaged, but it isn't necessarily safer. While we no longer smear vermilion or lead paste onto our cheeks, at least not knowingly, the cosmetics industry still has its shadows. Lipsticks can contain trace amounts of heavy metals, often without clear labeling. Red dyes may be derived from coal tar or synthetic lakes, while long-wear formulas can rely on plastics and solvents once reserved for industrial use. The quest for fuller lips has introduced plumping glosses laced with capsaicin or cinnamon oil irritants that create a tingling swell by inflaming delicate skin. Not inherently deadly, perhaps, but irritation and inflammation are the body's distress signals, not signs of wellness. And then there are injectable fillers, which, while technically safe when done well, can come with risks, allergic reactions, vascular occlusion, and complications that, though rare, are very real. Eyebrow trends haven't escaped either. While burnt clove and soot have been replaced by gentler brow tints and microblading tools, reactions still occur. Infections, allergic responses, and poorly regulated pigments can all lead to long-term damage in the name of a better arch. The troubling part is that in many parts of the world, regulation lags behind innovation. Products banned in one country for containing mercury or hydroquinone still show up in markets elsewhere or quietly resurface online. Whitening creams, illegal dyes, and counterfeit cosmetics are a thriving underground industry, promising fast results with a toxic price tag. We may no longer be dusting our faces with outright poison, but the impulse remains to stain the skin, to perfect the surface, even when it carries a cost. The danger today is more diluted, more discreet, but it hasn't disappeared. It's simply hidden in fine print and ingredient lists most of us don't read. We've lingered above the shoulders, eyes rimmed, lips flushed, brows arched just so, but beauty's demands have never stopped at the face. They travel downward, tightening around the waist with the force of a whispered command. And so, we arrive at the corset. For centuries, the corset was more than a garment, it was a scaffolding of expectation. It cinched not only the waist, but the very shape of womanhood, pressing it into a mold defined by society and stitched together with rules. A narrow waist wasn't just fashionable, it was moral. It was evidence of discipline, delicacy, and restraint. The ideal woman, they believed, should be held together, literally and figuratively. But the cost? That came with every tug of the laces. Doctors warned of shifted organs, compressed lungs, fainting spells, digestive disorders, and skeletal deformation. There are sketches, anatomical cross-sections showing how ribs folded in like origami, how the liver and stomach crowded together, trying to make space for fashion. And yet, the look endured, because looking refined meant something. It meant belonging. It wasn't always forced. Some women chose the corset willingly, strategically. In certain eras, it offered structure in more ways than one. For women entering the workforce or asserting autonomy, corsetry could provide literal backbone in a world that gave them little support. Others used it to flirt with the rules, shaping their bodies as a form of agency or allure, a rebellion wrapped in ribbon. But even rebellion leaves marks, and the echoes of that constriction are still with us. Today, waist obsession has simply traded its boning for buzzwords. We no longer cinch ourselves with whalebone and tightly wound ribbon, but we do squeeze ourselves into neoprene sweat belts, contoured shapewear, and waist trainers hawked by influencers with suspiciously sculpted midsections. Many of these modern tools promise detoxification, a word as seductive now as arsenic-laced complexion wafers once were. Never mind that detox teas often cause dehydration more than true cleansing, or that sweating through a neoprene corset doesn't melt fat, it just wrings out your water weight. The language is different: wellness, fitness, glow up, but the underlying promise is eerily familiar: transformation. At any cost. The corset has become digital and diet-coded. Even waist trainers marketed to postpartum women promise a return to pre-baby size, as if motherhood itself must be erased from the body. Surgical trends add another layer. Snatched waists and dramatic hip-to-waist ratios are glorified on social media, fueling demand for liposuction, ab etching, and the now infamous BBL, Brazilian butt lift. These procedures often involve real risk: blood clots, infections, or worse. In fact, the BBL has one of the highest mortality rates of any elective surgery. Still, the hashtag thrives. The corset has also gone digital. Filters compress our midsections, slim our arms, and lift our posture without so much as a corset hook. And as with belladonna dilated eyes, the illusion becomes the standard. We don't just want to look healthy, we want to look edited. Even cosmetics whisper the same message. Contouring makeup doesn't just define cheekbones, it shadows the face to create the illusion of thinness. Face slimming rollers claim to melt fat through friction. Most of these promises are smoke and mirrors, or at least science on shaky ground, but they sell. Because somewhere, a version of us might emerge smaller, smoother, closer to the ideal. Just as arsenic wafers were once praised for shrinking the appetite, today's detox culture asks us to swallow the same bitter pill in pastel packaging. It's not poison now, it's clean. But the effect is familiar. Control disguised as care, discipline wrapped in self-love. So while the boning may be gone, the shaping persists, and the ribs, though spared, aren't the only part of us that remembers. If corsets squeezed the torso into submission, hair has long been the canvas for another kind of control lone set aflame, quite literally, in the name of beauty. From the Renaissance onward, women have scorched, singed, and suffocated their hair into obedience. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, curling tongs were heated over open flames and then clamped onto delicate strands. A romantic ringlet could turn into a charred clump in an instant. But a woman with a halo of curls, no matter how many blistered fingers it cost, was considered polished, even desirable. The pursuit of smoothness, however, was not just about aesthetics. It was discipline. Civilized hair was tidy, tame, trained. In contrast, unruly hair, particularly textured or voluminous hair, was viewed as wild, unrefined, or improper. This wasn't just about fashion, it was social code, and it crossed continents. In Victorian Europe, women turned to harsh hair tonics and acidic rinses containing ammonia, sulfur, and even arsenic compounds to banish dandruff and shine the scalp. Many of these formulas had the added perk of smelling truly awful, but if it burned, it must be working. One arsenic-based hair restorer marketed in the 1800s was called the Crown of Beauty. It promised thick, glossy locks and a more youthful appearance. It also sometimes caused scalp burns, blistering, and hair loss. But if you didn't buy it, what message were you sending? That you had given up? Chemical straightening processes in the early 1900s, especially for Black women, offered no less danger. Early relaxers used lye, which could burn skin and leave permanent scars if mishandled. Yet straight hair, in a colonized world, was often the key to jobs, respectability, and safety. It was more than vanity. It was a means of survival. And today, the names have changed. The labels are prettier, but the heat remains. Flat irons now top 450 degrees. Keratin treatments boast sleek results while quietly exposing salon workers and clients to formaldehyde fumes. Chemical relaxers, though marketed more gently, still pose health risks, with mounting research suggesting links to hormonal disruption and reproductive issues. And for many women of color, the choice between natural and chemically treated hair is still laced with judgment, expectation, and coded language about professionalism and beauty. Even natural dyes aren't always innocent. Some brands labeled herbal or henna-based still sneak in metallic salts and other compounds. And bleach, the gateway to platinum perfection, has burned more than a few scalps and spirits. Meanwhile, the internet churns out DIY treatments by the dozen. Apple cider vinegar, baking soda, eggs, avocado, mayonnaise. Some of it is harmless, some of it is kitchen chemistry gone awry. But the promise persists. Maybe this will be the one that smooths you out, brightens you up, makes you shine just right. None of this is to scold the curling iron or cast shade on your shampoo. It's just a reminder that hair has always carried more than style. It's held rules, resistance, ritual, risk. And perhaps a question worth asking: when was the last time your hair felt free? If corsets molded the body and hair framed the face, then scent was the finishing spell, the unseen veil that cloaked a woman in mystery, wealth, or just the ability to pass unnoticed in a malodorous world. But the perfumes of yesteryear weren't just seductive, they were sinister, especially when they arrived in clouds of powdered poison. In 17th and 18th century France and England, it wasn't enough to look powdered. You had to smell powdered. Face powders, hair pomades, and even undergarments were perfumed with heady blends of musk, civet, ambergris, and floral oils. Unfortunately, those luxurious scents were often suspended in toxic carriers, crushed lead, arsenic compounds, or finely milled starches treated with mercury. These weren't trace ingredients, they were the main event. The kind of powder that could whiten your skin, scent your hair, and slowly wreck your nervous system in the process. Then came the wigs, towering, perfumed, status symbols, more sculpture than style. For the elite, they were made of horsehair or human hair, treated with mercury nitrate to prevent lice and add shine. The process was called kerating because it turned the base a pale orange. Workers who prepared these wigs, mostly men, were often driven mad from mercury exposure, hence the term mad as a hatter. But the women who wore them weren't immune either. The mercury lingered in the fibers, heated by candles in close quarters, inhaled during long hours of wear. Yet to smell bad was to be suspicious, lower class, diseased, or negligent. Bathing was irregular at best, and perfumed powders filled the gap. A woman could die by degrees under a mantle of crushed violet and lead dust, but at least she'd die sweetly. Scent was also a language of seduction. A dab of jasmine oil behind the ears, or a puff of rosewater down one's bodice, could communicate far more than words. And in some eras, the more overpowering the fragrance, the better. After all, who needed nuance when a scented glove could practically announce your arrival from across the ballroom? Fast forward to today, and we still wear our identities in scent. But the toxins haven't vanished, they've simply gone incognito. Modern perfume formulas are considered proprietary, protected as trade secrets. That means companies aren't required to disclose the hundreds of chemicals hidden behind the word fragrance. Some of those ingredients are harmless. Others are known endocrine disruptors, allergens, or hormone mimics linked to fertility issues and chronic illness. The body mists, room sprays, and scented lotions lining today's shelves may not smell like mercury, but many still flirt with danger. Especially when layered shampoo, conditioner, lotion, deodorant, perfume, each one whispering a chemical cocktail designed to stick to your skin and quietly settle in. And yet, we crave scent. We associate it with care, luxury, and memory. The smell of a mother's neck, the pillowcase of someone you love, the hint of vanilla or vetiver that turns a day from forgettable to something. The danger doesn't negate the longing. It just asks us to look a little closer at what's riding on that invisible veil. Maybe the real seduction isn't in the perfume bottle. Maybe it's in the fantasy it offers, that we can be remembered by something as soft as a trace of lavender and not by the things that weigh us down. Perhaps the real thread isn't just what we wore or powdered or perfumed, but what we were willing to endure in silence for the sake of acceptance, for beauty, for belonging. Not because women were vain or foolish, but because they were perceptive. They understood the rules of the game and played them with whatever tools they had, even if those tools carried poison in their pockets. But the story of dangerous beauty doesn't belong to Europe alone. It doesn't begin and end with lead-laced powders or mercury wigs. Across the globe, women have shaped themselves to ideals that, while sacred or symbolic, came with a bodily price. Take the practice of foot binding in imperial China. Tiny feet, bound tightly from childhood, were considered the pinnacle of refinement and femininity. The lotus gait, slow, swaying, seemingly delicate, was not just alluring, it was essential for upward mobility. But the cost? Crushed bones, lifelong pain, and limited mobility. And yet for centuries, it persisted not simply because men demanded it, but because generations of women taught it, performed it, believed in its power. Or consider the neck rings worn by some Kayan women of Myanmar and Thailand. The illusion of an elongated neck, achieved not by stretching but by pressing down the shoulders and collarbones, is a striking image. It is often romanticized, exoticized, even fetishized. But within the communities that practice it, it can hold real meaning, status, identity, and continuity with ancestral tradition. Then there's tattooing, far from the rebellion it's seen as in Western culture. In places like the Philippines, Samoa, and among the Inuit and Ainu peoples, tattoos were rites of passage, marks of protection, and symbols of feminine strength or spiritual connection. The process was painful and sometimes risky, but it wasn't vanity, it was sacred. These practices weren't done to women, They were often upheld by women, passed from mother to daughter as a form of cultural transmission. And here's the nuance. Pain wasn't the point, it was the price. And for many, it was willingly paid for the promise of place, pride, or continuity. Today, the mirror looks different, but the reflection is familiar. Elective surgeries, body sculpting, skin bleaching, extreme body mods, each decision shaped by a complex blend of agency, influence, and expectation. Are we freer now? Perhaps. But the longing for beauty that means something, that secures something, hasn't gone away. It's just found new tools and subtler forms of permission. So, as we look outward at these traditions, we must look inward too, not with judgment, but with curiosity. What are we still doing to belong, to be seen, to be safe? What rituals are we passing down, and to whom? The pursuit of beauty has always been more than skin deep. Beneath every powdered face and corseted waist, every perfumed wrist and stained lip, there is a story, not of vanity, but of adaptation, of resilience, of women navigating a world that often asked them to be ornaments before it allowed them to be architects. It would be easy to look back with a raised brow, to wonder how anyone could trade their health for a powdered wig or swallow arsenic for a paler glow. But look closer, and the picture shifts. These were acts of participation in systems they didn't build, but understood intimately. Women worked within the lines, yes, but they also traced new shapes, found slivers of control in the rituals imposed on them, and sometimes rewrote the rules altogether. And though the ingredients may have changed, lead traded for microplastics, arsenic wafers for injectable trends, the deeper question remains: what are we still trading in the name of beauty? What risks are tucked into the fine print of our routines? And how much of what we call choice is shaped by the cultural currents we've learned to swim in? There's no neat answer, no scolding, just a soft invitation to pause, to notice how far we've come and how many habits we've inherited, to consider beauty not as performance, but as conversation between self, society, and the stories we carry, to meet ourselves and each other with a gentler gaze. Rest now, with the understanding that beauty has always been more than a surface. It has been survival, resistance, artistry. And now, perhaps, it can become something even freer. Good night. May your dreams see you the way the stars always have, radiant, just as you are.